The derailment of the train in East Palestine was a disaster, but in a very real sense, it was the disaster after that that truly did a lot of damage in the area. That was the intentional burning of hazardous chemicals that created this toxic plume that is believed to have contaminated a very wide area. And the question is, was that actually necessary? And that was one of the big focuses, as well as some other fascinating details that came out of a National Transportation Safety Board meeting that's been going on today and yesterday. And some of the stuff that's coming out of this is just fascinating. So was the venting and the burning actually necessary? Norfolk Southern, of course, is of the position that it was. But those who made the actual chemicals, particularly Oxyvinyls, that corporation, they feel differently. Take a look at this testimony.
On Saturday evening, February 4th, representatives of Oxyvinyl spoke directly with representatives of Norfolk Southern and its emergency response contractors regarding conditions at the derailment site. We made it clear, based on our expertise of the chemical properties of our product, that stabilized VCM would be unlikely to spontaneously polymerize under the conditions described to us by Norfolk Southern and its contractor. For this reason, we emphasize to Norfolk Southern and its contractors the importance of monitoring the temperature of the rail cars. And on Sunday morning, February 5th, we further reinforced our view that polymerization was not occurring during a call with Norfolk Southern representatives. On Sunday evening, Steve met with Norfolk Southern's emergency response contractors and, for the third time, stated Oxyvinyl's view that polymerization of VCM was not occurring.
So again, look, there's a lot of dueling accusations and dueling information going back and forth between several different groups. So the manufacturers of the chemicals, Norfolk Southern, who controls the trains, as well as those managing the disaster response. But according to that representative from Oxyvinyls, it seems like it was not in fact necessary. Now, they told Norfolk Southern this, as you saw in that video, at least 3 different times in the lead up to the decision to vent and burn the chemicals. And if it's not immediately clear, the reason that was given for doing that was, if you vent it and burn it, you create an absolutely massive toxic plume that can potentially contaminate a wide area, but you avoid the possibility of an even more catastrophic explosion. That was the explanation that was given. Now, interestingly, at least according to the information that we've been presented with, Norfolk Southern did not pass along the information that you just saw to first responders, including the East Palestine fire chief, who made the final decision to do the venting and the burning. So again, is that claim true? At this point, we don't know. That's just what we've seen in this testimony. And to be fair, Oxyvinyl's own sort of like safety data sheet for the chemical says that excessive heat should be avoided because it could lead to an explosion. Although they say in the extended testimony that at various points the temperature had been taken and it did not appear that it was reaching levels of heat that would actually cause that sort of instantaneous explosion. And by the way, William Carroll, so outside of just that company, William Carroll is a chemistry professor at Indiana University, said that the chemical reaction being talked about in that clip can't happen in the presence of heat alone. It also needs an organic chemical which wasn't present to be activated by the heat. And so at least according to the company that makes the chemical, which has a vested interest in what comes out of this, let's bear that in mind, as well as this chemistry professor, it doesn't appear that it was actually necessary, and there might have been a breakdown of information, either accidentally or intentionally, that resulted in that plume that many people believe has negatively affected their health, as well as killed many animals in the region.
My guess is they needed to move stuff off the rails so they can keep the trains running, so they can make more money. And that they thought, well, a giant mushroom cloud of hazardous chemicals over your town is a small price you have to pay for me making more money. That's my guess. Sharon.
I think you're spot on. It's gonna come down to money. And until the professor stepped up, I don't believe anything any of these people said. Not a shred of any information they disseminated because of their own vested interest. 30 years from now, we'll find out that people are really hurting, like more than usual, and that they have even more specialized diseases that won't be fixed, but Hollywood will make another movie about it. This whole thing is ridiculous. I failed chemistry and my sister's a chemist, but at the end of the day, I don't believe any of this, okay? And I don't think we even know the beginning of this tragedy, okay? Let alone the end.
Yeah, and by the way, I think, look, a lot of people probably agree that they wanted to get the train off there, but I don't even know that you need to believe that to think that they might have made a decision that wasn't in the interest of the people in the region. It could be that they thought there is X percentage chance of a catastrophic explosion. If you think it's 100, then you definitely do the burn. But what do you do if you think it's 50 or 10? Or 5% chance. If you think that maybe it's super unlikely, but if it happens, then we are gonna be in a world of trouble. So let's just avoid that worst case scenario by doing something that perhaps saves us from being exposed to more liability, but does more obvious predictable damage in the meantime. It's possible that they made that calculation.
So guys, I run a business, and I keep saying that because I have a perspective into the business community that not everyone does, okay? And we resist those pressures all the time. But those pressures are not just 100% real, they're overwhelming. And the pressure is maximize goddamn profit. Any other consideration is mental. It's not even to be discussed, okay? So they're gonna maximize profit how? One is get that stuff off the tracks. Every day we're losing a lot of money. Like, so you're gonna be the idiot who lost us all that money because you wouldn't move stuff off the tracks? Oh no, you're gonna get fired, okay? Money, okay? Number two is John's point. One, hey, you might care about the people in the community if it turns out it's gonna be an even bigger explosion and it's gonna endanger them. Okay, that's really important. Now, mind you, you could avoid that by moving the people out, bringing them to hotels, paying for that, but that's also money. And if it blows, you're gonna be sued for way more, in which case that's even more money. So when you put all that in a spreadsheet, and brothers and sisters, I hate to tell you this, but the world is run by spreadsheets. And you put it into a spreadsheet, you compute, it's a no-brainer, burn it, and if it turns out that people get hurt, I mean, what's gonna happen to us anyway, right? What, is Buttigieg gonna regulate us?
I feel like you were in the room. What you just said, that whole scenario, that whole monologue, I feel like that was said in a room of these executives, and then they put the plan into action. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Well, I've been in a similar sort of situation. I once accidentally blocked Cenk in a hallway, and he told me, "Get out of the way, money." And I thought, okay, geez,
believe
go to the
me.
kitchen.
His voice changed and everything. Yeah.
Believe me, there's a lot of people who wish that I did act that way.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, as consequential as all of what we just saw is for many people's health, and as Sharon pointed out, the concerns that will go forward in the future by literally decades, it wasn't all that was found. In addition to new evidence about whether the forced burning of chemicals following the train derailment in East Palestine, we also have some other revelations from the hearings that have been going on. We're gonna run through a few of these. They're all concerning, all worthy of diving into, but there are a lot. Including that the rail car that suffered an overheated bearing, which caused the derailment, had not been recently inspected, according to a union official. Also, an engineer who inspected the 150-car train expressed concern about the size of the train to the yardmaster, who replied, "Well, this is what they want." And Norfolk Southern has responded to some of these concerns by noting that federal regulators do not have any requirements for train configuration, and that the train met the railroad's internal policies. Which means, in layman's terms, they were self-regulating, which means they did what they wanted, not what was safe. That is an argument for federal regulation. Will it actually come? We'll have to wait and find out. In addition to that, the head of the Federal Railroad Administration warned Norfolk Southern and other major railroads in September about using what are considered ghost tracks to skirt inspection rules. And the FRA administrator Amit Bose said that the agency had evidence that railroads were not properly checking trains into terminals, meaning that they could avoid being inspected by dedicated carmen and would instead be checked by other workers. So even the safety checks that were required were only required when you follow the rules. If you skirt them, sort of a little transportation loophole, then you don't have to do that. You could do more casual inspections and probably have things roll along a little bit faster, make a little bit more money. But occasionally you have a derailment and a massive toxic plume that sickens people.
Okay, I'm gonna, spoiler alert, Biden and Buttigieg aren't going to regulate them. Okay, they're not gonna do anything for the next couple of years, let alone this. So all that you're hearing here now, it's important that you know, and it's important you know how your government works and how business works, and this country unfortunately is run. But Biden and Buttigieg couldn't be motivated to check corporations if their life depended on it. That's their mommies and daddies. That's where they get all the donor money, and they're not going to do anything that hurts them. And if you think Republicans are any better, you're smoking crack on a different planet. You're doing both at the same time. So unfortunately, as with a lot of stories these days, there's no hope.
Yeah, no hope, and I think you're right. And didn't Buttigieg, it took him a while, right, before he said he was even gonna go there. But I also, you ever watch that show Air Disasters? It really, these kinds of tragedies bring into focus what is said. Oh, it's the safest thing ever. It's safer than driving a car. And then what's the reality here? And self-regulation is in a lot of places, and there's a lot of loopholes. And I think you're right that this perhaps will educate the public, or media won't really do a deep dive, and not that many people will learn from this about what really went on. But it's a shame, because I don't think either the left or the right is gonna help in this instance.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.